Let's explore why reducing and healing trauma is one of the single most intelligent human endeavors that a country, a family, a species can participate in. The first thing to look at is the brain's relationship to pain versus pleasure, and particularly survival-oriented pain versus pleasure. And because life is a marathon, because life is a long-haul activity, the brain prioritizes risk reduction over pleasure, with the idea that if at 2 years old you see something pleasurable, you have a chance to do something pleasurable, like eat an ice cream cone, or you have a chance to go to the hospital and remove snake venom, etc., that if you don't prioritize the elimination of pain, you don't make it to 3 years old. And if at 3 years old you don't prioritize the elimination of pain, you don't make it to 4 years old. And the best estimate that I can find of the amount that the brain prioritizes reducing negativity or is affected by negativity more than positivity comes in John Gottman's work in the praise to criticism ratio needed to sustain a marriage. And what John discovers is that if you are not praising your partner 5 times more than you're criticizing them, that the marriage is over. And one of the ways that we can see that is you're going to a party and you get a compliment, and you get a compliment, you get a compliment, oh, you look nice. And then one person says, doesn't that guy look terrible? Isn't that a horrible outfit? We immediately tend to fixate on the negative and blow it out of proportion. So if we understand that it is the nature of our brain to amplify negativity at least 5 times more than positivity, then in the intelligent game of spending the least amount of energy to create the most amount of sustainable well-being, deleting pain is a better return on investment than infusing the area with new positive energies. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is we can look at it in this diagram here. The human ego is a zoom-in lens that, for the most part, focuses on a very narrow version of reality. And anything in that very narrow version of reality is a very big deal to the human ego. So this hand may not be very important to someone in Africa, but as soon as I put it over my eyes, this hand is a really big deal. And it's a really big deal because it's totally blocking a very narrow lens of perception. Because I'm viewing reality through this very narrow lens, things that are close to me are really big deals. Now, the human ego is not just a physical set of eyes, it's a consciousness. And so within consciousness, even where my eyes are covered, I can remember. I can remember and imagine a variety of different realities that come before, that go beyond, etc., that are bigger than just what my eyes can see. I can hear things, I can taste things, I can remember, I can imagine. Now, there is a limit to the size of the human ego, of human consciousness. And as long as we can keep some perspective, if reality is not loud enough, close enough, violent enough, etc., that we can have perspective, we tend to deal with reality with the rational brain up in here somewhere. We've got the limbic brain, we've got the traumatic reptilian brain, we've got the rational brain, we've got the future thinking and imaginal brain. We have the transcendent brain, that's the most enjoyable of all the brains of, in great states of peace and relaxation to go beyond the individual ego and become a part of something more. But what happens when there is a severe pain, an intense energy, is we get thrust down into the reptilian brain, which is all about fear and flight, fight, or freeze out of pain and fear. Now, because the human ego is small and reality is big, there are times, particularly if we're out of sync with reality, where an energy field in reality is so big that it confronts us as a really big force. And we can kind of see if the zoom-in lens of the ego can see this much, and the reality that we're experiencing is migrating in front of that lens, then pretty soon we're going to be in a state in which reality dwarfs the lens, in which a certain part of reality, a certain emotion, a certain thought, a certain visceral reality dominates every part of our consciousness and obscures any sense of context. And this induces the reptilian brain response of fight, flight, and freeze. Now, when we're in fight, flight, and freeze, we're also in a part of our brain that is reactive. We're not dealing with a conscious, measured part of the brain. So we're looking at compulsive, reactive, addictive, and unconscious, which in general in our culture today equals more pain, which will then add to the flooding, to the dominance of the traumatic symptoms. So we can be caught in a tailspin in which the more pain and shock there is, the more reactive we become. And the more reactive we become, the more pain and shock there is. And like anything, energy spreads. If we damage our own reality, for example, financially, then we damage everyone who's depending on us financially. And then they damage, to a certain extent, people who are depending on them financially. And so reality happens in a viral pattern. And so if an individual goes into trauma and then into tailspin, they will generate the viral pattern of pain and fear and trauma spreading out around them until they are contained to one degree or another. And that's why, if you are in a reality framework neurologically in which pain is 5 times louder than pleasure, when they're both in the same environment. And all you have to do to think about that is, okay, you're in a room of 100 peaceful people and one person sticks a gun in the air and fires it. Your whole attention is on the gun. It's not on the 99 peaceful people. And this is the prioritization of pain and the fear of pain. So given that reality, then the highest return on investment in terms of creating well-being is to reduce pain and fear. And the best return on investment in that domain is to heal, mitigate, and avoid trauma in the first place. And if we don't want pain and fear to spread, but we want well-being to spread, then everyone's pain and fear and trauma to some extent is our business. And the good news is that just about anyone who's in pain and fear and trauma who has not learned that they will be shamed for receiving help, for being vulnerable, for telling the truth, etc., wants to get out of pain, fear, and trauma and will receive help. As soon as someone gets out of pain, fear, and trauma, then the virus of pain and fear and trauma around that person stops spreading. And this is why you can measure the intelligence of a cult, be it a family, a community, a business, or a country, by the effectiveness with which it anticipates, avoids, responds to, and prioritizes the effective healing of trauma. Thanks.